Welcome to Hobbit Hoopla.
Hoopla!
The unofficial podcast of Middle Earth. The best podcast ever to come out of Middle Earth. Probably.
Maybe.
We're here this week to talk about...
rule them all.
Oh, new tagline. The greatest podcast ever. I just changed your tagline.
It's even better.
We're back this week to talk about The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Last week, we talked about The Fellowship of the Ring, and now we're here to talk about the follow-up, Two Towers. Joining me, as always, the fellow members of the Hoopla Crewpla, starting with the Loy... Whoa.
The Loin Master. Gollum.
The Master of Lore.
Some call him
Thank
the Loin
you.
Master.
It's true.
Andy
It's
Smith.
true. Hey, Jamie, Andy Smith here, connoisseur of many nerdy things, DC, Marvel, Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars. So, did you guys know? No, I can't. We already did a take. Viggo Mortensen broke his foot. Everybody knows this. We don't need
And it was
when
a Hoopla
when he
exclusive.
kicked the orc helmet. Did you know?
Are you serious?
He
That was
broke
a
his
real
foot? He
cry?
broke his foot.
Dude,
Wow.
the commitment
It was
of this
God.
man.
A live cry, Aragorn. Beautiful.
And here to give us an even more Hoopla exclusive fun fact from the filming of The Two Towers is Chris Pio. Pressure's on, baby. What do you got for us?
Come on.
It was filmed on cameras.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Chris.
That
Thanks
still
so
only
much.
counts as one.
One fun fact indeed. Chris Pio here, so pleased to be back for episode 2 here of our Lord of the Rings trilogy. Two Towers is a great movie. Again, we talked about, Fellowship being the starting point of such a great journey, and the middle film here is only the best continuation possible. So very, very pumped to talk about this. We are doing the extended version, mind you. Just a quick reminder.
Indeed. So this episode also might be a little bit extended because our fourth guest here today is going to extend this conversation as we have the master of the trees, our very own resident Ent with those two little plants in the background. Jake Laxer.
Absolutely. Jake Laxer here, lover of all things biology and entology.
Ooh,
Who loves a good tree beard? I know I certainly do. How about you? I love the second movie, Two Towers.
Love Treebeard.
Yeah, love Treebeard. Love Two Towers. Great film. The numbers in the consecutive, portion of the films of the trilogy. Yeah, it just reminds me that we're
you
watching
saying
the second movie. So that's
Second
great.
movie, and it's called
So
Two Towers.
it's a
Is that what you're
sequel?
saying?
Anyhow, this is great.
Okay.
We're back. We're doing it. And Middle Earth is at war. Okay, let's do this thing.
Yeah. A bit of a chaotic start to the podcast episode. We did have some technical difficulties, and so we're just extra
we're
filled today.
We're excited. But tell me this, Jamie. What happened to the Ent wives? Okay? I want to know.
we lost them,
what
dude.
happened.
We lost them.
They're lost.
We
It's
turned
not
we
described
closed our eyes for
further than
1
that.
second.
Maybe Jake Laxer
hate to
knows
see
since
it.
he is our resident Ent.
Yeah, the Entwives are out there saving lives. We don't see them because obviously they're in the most crucial role of the Ent community, which is maintaining the forest. Chris.
Okay, you heard it here first.
Cameras.
Hey,
Remember how they had
on a number of
cameras?
ways, including
All
us
sorts of
getting
fun facts.
canceled. But
Anyway, thank you all for tuning into this episode of the
We
Hoopla
survived.
podcast.
Just like the Ents.
We're making it through. As we announced last week for our very first ever video podcast episode, you guys can watch us now on Spotify, or you can watch us on YouTube, as well as just listen to the audio on whatever podcast app you like listening to. And if you want to stay up to date with everything we're doing in the Hoopla world, Chris, where can they follow us?
you should head on over to your favorite social media app, especially if that app is X, Instagram, or TikTok, and find us at Hoopla Podcasts. That's X, Instagram, and TikTok for at Hoopla Podcast to stay all the way up to date with the news coming out of the Hoopla Crewpla, as well as what's going on in the world of pop culture here. Definitely follow us over on the TikTok. We've got some new content coming your way. A little D&D post that was just put up there for any of our Dungeons and Dragons friends out there in the
Which
fantasy
we know
realm.
there are many.
And there are many. And do stick around if you like Dungeons and Dragons, because I've got a segment later in the show that I think you're going to enjoy.
Ooh. What a
my
tease.
goodness.
Incredible.
I am excited.
That's right, folks. So tune in, because in exactly 17 minutes, Chris will be discussing D&D.
Can you stop putting me on a spot just all over the place,
Set
please?
your timers. And Andy, you got a nice hat on. Jake, you've got a nice hat on. I'm drinking a delicious
That's
cup
a nice
of tea right
mug.
now. Wow.
Oh my God, that
where
beanie.
where can someone go to get something like this, Andrew?
You know where you
Unbelievable.
could find that merch is on hooplapodcastnetwork.square.site. Come and take a look at the new merch we have going up. We might even have a malt beer mug going up here soon. So there's a lot of good stuff happening over on hooplapodcastnetwork.square.site as we're releasing all this nice Hobbit Hoopla content for you guys.
Boom. Wonderful. So again, thank you all for tuning into this episode. Give us a follow on whatever podcast app you're listening to and tell all your friends about it. I know you have friends who are out here watching Lord of the Rings. And if they want to join the Hoopla and chat about these fun movies with us, go ahead and share our videos, our podcast with everyone you've ever met.
Like, share, comment below.
Yeah, what Jake said.
You know, it's
So now,
YouTube.
without any further
That's what they
ado,
do.
Let's start talking about arguably the best Lord of the Rings movie. We'll get to our official ratings at the end of the episode, but The Two Towers is a spectacular movie where we follow up with all of our best friends from the Fellowship, which has now broken apart as Frodo and Sam go off on their solo adventure while Sam's joining. We have the two other hobbits, Merry and Pippin, have been captured by the orcs, and Aragorn, Gimli, and
Urukai.
Legolas. Thank you, sir. Correction, Jake.
Welcome.
Always
They
good
call
for a
me.
correction. As Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli search for their friends, their poor little halfling friends, and the whole world of Middle-earth is falling into darkness. War is starting. Darkness is taking over. Saruman has his white hand in all the reaches of this Middle-earth. And we just kind of get thrown right in to where we left off into the first movie with, who should we talk about first? Should we talk about our heroes going to save the halflings, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, the classic trio?
Classic
like you
trio
have
who
to.
cannot stop running. I need action
Watching
sequence.
them
days.
run.
Yes, sweeping aerial shots,
Without
them
stop for rest.
sprinting. Yeah.
Not a bite to eat.
Every single shot, Gimli is 30 yards behind, but he's still
Yeah.
keeping pace. He's running the
he's
exact
doing
same
really
speed as
well.
everybody else.
He's doing quite
those
well.
short, stubby legs.
He's falling down the cliff, gets right back up, and says, "We're more of sprinters." You know, it's like that. Good job.
He's keeping
At short
pace.
distances.
He is.
Know your
He is.
strengths, you know?
And especially after you see like the Urukai right after they meet the like goblins and the other orcs, how far and how quickly they're moving, and the fact that you could maybe expect that Legolas, as an elf, could keep pace, but like
Sure.
Aragorn, who, well, he's a ranger, he has some special abilities, but Gimli as well, like they're moving and they catch up to him pretty quickly overall.
No.
It's impressive. Legolas even calls it out. He says something some dark force is at work here. It just doesn't make sense how they haven't caught up to them yet. And all it takes is for them stopping for eating maggoty bread for three stinking days.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think one of the best parts of this movie are just when you hear the orcs talking back and forth to each other. You know, you have Pippin and Mary gets some of that. What is he? Okay, tell me this. What liquid does he consume?
Great question.
I always wanted to know.
Straight motor oil. Yeah.
And was he lying?
Jake, we're a Lucas Oil podcast. We're supposed to be saying a competitor's name on here.
Lucas Oil.
There you go. Yeah.
We're
Thank you to our sponsor this episode,
Lucas
Oil.
That is, we're
That's
really
thinking
happy
with your
to have
dipstick.
Lucas Oil on board. What? So did Mary actually think that? Or was that a joke by Mary to make Pippin feel better, or was he? I never have really understood this one scene. I like it. It's really nice to see the connection there, and Mary is alive, so that's really good to see. But I don't really know what's going on there.
Plus.
Major plus.
It's always good when our friends are alive.
Yeah.
I think he was actually
Was
suffering.
he trying to get?
I don't
the
think
liquid?
he was playing it. I think he was.
Okay.
I think he was legitimately unconscious because he was in so much pain and being tortured by the Uruk-hai, and then he was just playing it off afterwards of like, "Hey, buddy, it's okay.
Make
We're
Pippin
we're
feel a
be
little
all
bit
right."
better.
Yeah.
Well, they just
Because you gotta have a best
oiled him on
friend.
up, and he was good to go. I mean, he just he's like the fucking
Brought to
Tin
you
Man.
by Lucas Oil.
Brought to you by the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, Mary has always had kind of the more responsibility
Yeah,
of the two
yeah. He's the
of the
adult.
other hobbits. He's definitely the adult.
Not that
Pippin
there's
always the
much
one
between.
getting in trouble. This is true. Yeah, there's not a lot of adult responsibility aspects going on between the two of them at all. But Mary definitely has more of that. I don't want to say maternal, but more caring and more intrinsically responsible for Pippin, who's always getting into trouble.
Even though they
fool of a
were
took.
both passing back and forth that one dragon firework about 72 hours ago, right?
This is true.
That was
That was actually
on this adventure
that was
for
like 6
months and months.
That
and
was like
months.
6 months ago, I presume.
72 hours for us.
Sure.
But we also see the same thing to Chris's point, where at the end of this movie, Mary is the one who's arguing with the Ents. He's like, I know you guys don't think you're part of this world, but you are part of this world. You need to hurry up this conversation because Saruman's taking over. They're burning the forest, and you guys need to do something about it. And Mary's the one that really, sticks it to the Ents. They still ignore him until Pippin, taking the lead from Mary, convinces Treebeard to take them south, past Isengard.
Well, that's
And then we
actually after he convinces the female Ents off camera, right, Chris?
That's absolutely true, Jake.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's where the Entwives are the whole time. They're just on the other side of the camera.
Correct.
They're only like 15 feet away. You just can't see them.
Yes.
But when we get to Isengard and we have the scene of the Ents taking down Isengard, that's always
Oh my
been
God.
one of my
Yeah.
absolute favorite parts of Lord of the Rings.
That's one of my favorite YouTube memes.
Taking the hobbits to Isengard?
We're taking the hobbits to Isengard. We're taking the hobbits to Isengard.
That scene has my favorite physical comedy joke in maybe any movie ever. And it's obviously when one of the Ents is on fire and he's rushing
and he puts his water in.
Some of the
Brilliant.
best comedy. And so many subtle, tiny hints of comedy in such a dark, dark world. And that one plays off the best, I think.
I mean, is that might be up there as one of my favorite like fantasy moments. Just generally, is when all the Ents come marching down the last march of the Ents, right? And they just completely and utterly destroy this dark wizard, right? And it's so inspirational too. Like the music plays really well when you bring the force of the water down and it starts wiping out
Break the dam.
break the dam.
Release the river.
And to your point, like some of the humor there, Treebeard is hilarious. And when
Of course.
Pippin and Mary are throwing rocks and it hits a orc and knocks him off, and he says, "Nice shot." As they're all like, some of them are like, one is on fire and may die in a moment, and he's like he's playing off of it, and he just realized that half of the forest was cut down and all of like many of his friends were dead. Like, and I love that scene too, Jamie.
Yeah, you always got to have a little bit of humor, even in the
There's
most
some levity.
terrible, brutal battle scenes. The entire civilization at hiding in Helm's Deep, they're all moments away from being entirely murdered by this horde of orcs. And Gimli and Legolas are just joking around. They're like, "Hey, I got 17 kills. How many do you have?"
19.
Maybe that's why it works too, though, Jamie. Right when you're like, you have this humor, but it's not like overbearing humor, which I think. I mean, I'm not going to go into the Hobbit conversation, but like that was a little bit more overbearing. This is more just like subtle conversations, or not always subtle, but just conversations, right? And it works so well. And like, how do you like banter off of like Frodo and Sam going through this despair, this journey full of despair, then cutting over, and then you have, Pippin hitting orc with a rock and everyone laughing. But it works. And I think that's one of the beauties of the series.
On all that pipe weed that they find.
All the South Farthing, the long bottom leaf.
Treebeard sees the smoke. He's like,
for me.
What's going on in here?
Yeah.
The only joke in Sam and Frodo's story in this entire film is when Sam goes, "Oh, we've got lambus bread." And oh, look, more lambus bread.
Honestly, I laugh. When he says that.
That's the lightest note that they have at all in their adventure in this second film. Oh, is that a Balrog?
I got a Balrog in my room.
Balrog of Morgoth.
It's a Baldog. Yeah. It's a ranger.
It's a ranger, the Baldog.
Wow.
A Dunedain ranger.
So speaking of the Balrog, which, I just kind of worked that in pretty flawlessly.
Yeah, let's hear it.
That was beautiful.
I love that this film starts with Gandalf. I think it's so cool. Not only does it let you know that there's more to Gandalf's story, there's more to Ian McKellen's story, it also lets you know we're going right back into it. Your wizard friend died at the last movie. You've been waiting a couple years for this one to come out in theaters. Guess what? Here's the coolest CGI you've ever seen in 2004.
Yeah.
Here is Gandalf coming back, ready to do battle.
It still looks good.
It still looks good. It still looks amazing. Still holds up. Some things in this movie don't.
Sure.
We'll talk about that later, but that
not 20 years later.
Absolutely looks cool. No, absolutely not. But that still looks so cool. And I just love that decided to start on that note. Here's some action. And then they go right into catching up all the characters. They talk about Sam and Frodo. Boring skip. And then they go back to their adventures. That's sorrow. Look, come on.
How dare you?
I'm fast forwarding through the Sam and Frodo scenes if I'm watching on a streaming platform. Okay?
No.
This hurts. It's the heart and soul.
This is almost as
story.
painful as carrying the ring.
I couldn't have done it without Sam. Not without my Sam.
Samwise the Brave.
Samwise the Brave.
Samwise the Brave. If you're fast forwarding, you're not doing it right. But those scenes are definitely
they're slower.
Low point. They're the slow point. It's just what it is. It's just that's the struggle of a ring bear.
It's emotional. It's pain.
It is.
It's suffering. It's
Faramir,
struggle. It's emotional torment that Frodo's going through. Seeing Smeagol fight against his Gollum mind and fighting against that, fearing for what Frodo's going to become, hoping that he can redeem Smeagol to show himself that he can redeem himself, and fighting against his friend Sam, who's trying to help Frodo and trying to hurt Smeagol. So while they're both on the same adventure together, they're opposed when it comes to Smeagol, who they're kind of reluctantly tied to and following behind. It is the best part of the story.
Ooh,
Sam and Frodo
I love that.
going on this adventure.
Okay.
You're such an intellectual.
I love that argument, Jimbo.
I mean, look at all those books.
Wow.
Hey.
Gotta love it. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I do love the Sam and Frodo story. I like how Gollum really comes to the forefront in this movie. And we see sort of his mercurial nature between his like evil
Who's
possessive
the
sort
intellectual
of
now?
we see sort of
Good
Smeagol
follow-up,
and Gollum. Thank you. I'm trying my best here. And we see Smeagol and Gollum, and it's just the dichotomy between the two is just wild.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
The way they just do the camera shots between like him turning it this way and him turning that way,
Reflections.
it's not all that creative, but at the same time, when you introduce like such a variety of his persona, it's so like enthralling. And then
They
for
absolutely
yeah,
nailed that shot where they had Gollum and Smeagol talking to each other.
Talking back and
where the
forth.
first couple times that Gollum says something and Smeagol says something, the camera slowly pans from left to right, from Smeagol to Gollum.
Very cool.
And then it gets to a point where it just cuts back and forth, and you get two entirely separate characters. It's beautifully shot.
It's not
entirely
just
CGI.
It's not just
but
wonderfully
right.
directed. It's also wonderfully acted.
Yeah,
and
Andy Serkis.
The creature work is incredible. Like bringing Gollum, Smeagol to life in this film, like that was a hell of a job. Like obviously the large set pieces were probably the most difficult to put together, but the way that Smeagol worked, like Peter Jackson did a heck of a job with those scenes.
1000%.
Even though it might have been like a
1000%.
little, like a lot of people like Chris, I think you would think the Frodo, Sam, Smeagol storyline is a little bit slower, but it's also more gloom, and it's purposefully shot that way as well. So like you have the brightness of Rohan, right? And you have the brightness, or I guess deep green, of the forest. That's kind of nice and inviting. Whereas you pan over to Frodo, and it's almost a descent into just gloom
Madness,
and madness that results in like you're getting close to the Black Gate.
Jim was kind of touching on this for like a hot second, like a hot fiery second, kind of like the Ents head on fire. I absolutely loved how Frodo's like commitment to keep Gollum around isn't so much as like the necessity for him as a guide, but for him to see the potential hope for Gollum being redeemed and sort of seeing that reflection in himself. That is like such an interesting aspect to this whole thing, because obviously they could figure out their own way, and obviously Gollum and Smeagol has created all the obstacles and problems for them along their journey, but for him to feel like the necessity to see redemption for this character and have that reflection on himself is so cool. There's so much depth to that.
I couldn't agree more, Jake. That's beautifully said. I think Frodo sees a lot of Smeagol in himself.
Now you
That's
think
my
it's a good
timer.
story?
My section. You shut up. It's my section. Let's talk Dungeons and Dragons. Look at
Fast
17
forward through
minutes.
Chris's section because it's too boring.
No. We have to linger here for a moment because Jake makes an excellent point. I noticed it a lot more on this rewatch when we're watching Frodo succumb to the power of the ring. He's like lying awake at night, toying around with it in his hands, and then all of a sudden he sees Gollum struggling with his own split personality. He sees the effects of what this ring can do over the lasting centuries, so he understands maybe there's still some hope for this creature if there is hope for me.
Yeah.
We get a line about halfway through the movie from Galadriel, who kind of gives us just a whole halfway point of the whole trilogy, which I never really noticed is truly kind of halfway through the entire runtime of the trilogy. But she says that Frodo now understands that this will claim his life. We don't really understand what that would mean before watching the end, but I think that speaks beautifully to what you're saying, Jake. It's he sees himself in Smeagol and Gollum, and he's going to try and do everything he can to try and illuminate a future for both of them if he can. I think the hinge point is really when, obviously, he's in the pool after Faramir and the Rangers capture him, and he tricks Gollum into getting captured again. I think that snuffed any hope out.
Can we talk about that scene for a minute, where he's been captured after, Frodo said, Smeagol, come here, and then he gets captured. They're in the cave, and you start to hear the Gollum Smeagol dichotomy come
Seeps
back,
in.
and grows and grows and grows, and then another one of those fright moments, right? That we saw with Bilbo in the first, we saw with Galadriel. When the jump scare when he screams at Faramir, and it changes kind of the trajectory of that story.
What is it that they have? Ball process.
Oh, Jake,
Oh my
I didn't know you had that
god!
hiding.
Thank you.
Andy,
Wow, he's an
yeah,
Ent and a
thank you.
Gollum.
Sir,
Thank you.
You dab.
Thank you.
It's over.
and scene.
but that
Yeah, so
that
it's kind
scene
of-
is intense.
It's devastating when Smeagol loses his faith in Frodo, because he had successfully kicked Gollum out for a little while, and who's to say that Gollum wouldn't come back later on as they continued their adventure if he hadn't been betrayed by Frodo. But when you start to get that, Frodo start to get exactly what he was hoping for, hoping to see that he could redeem Smeagol, and he kind of had. Until they got caught by Faramir and his troop, and then
One question,
Frodo
Jamie.
wasn't necessarily betraying Gollum, because he did save his life, but is definitely a little bit of a betrayal.
Jamie, you know how something that just came to mind that I haven't really thought about in the past. Smeagol, then Gollum as we knew him. He had the precious, like that created Gollum. He then lost the ring. And at the moment that he says he'll do anything for his master, he'll do anything for Frodo, he's almost replaced his subservience that was to the ring now with Frodo. And at the moment that Frodo kind of, it's almost he's been tricked again. Like, I feel like Gollum's been tricked for thousands, like hundreds of years or something. I haven't thought about, like, Frodo's almost replacing the ring in his eyes. And then he realizes, no, I need the precious back.
Yeah.
Rings all that
And
matters,
that's when Gollum comes back into his life. He succumbs back to Gollum, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Dude, my guy's just out here on a rock enjoying some fresh sushi. He gets tricked by his boy.
Freshly
And he's
pounded
fucking
sushi.
arrested. Gets fucking
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like, that's
brutal.
a horrible day. I don't blame him for being upset.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Poor guy. But he is going to get his revenge. Maybe, spoilers, he might get his revenge by
let
betraying
her
Frodo and
do
Sam
it.
Yeah, we
in
could
the
let
very
her
next
do it.
movie.
I want to talk, and for a long time, as a younger Lord of the Rings fan, I never really understood the difference between the men of Gondor and the men of Rohan, and really the men of any other place, especially the men that serve out in the east that end up serving Sauron. But as I become a more mature Lord of the Rings fan, I can definitely tell the distances. Obviously, Rohan has the horses, which is a great indicator. Our traveling adventurers run into the defective riders of Rohan, Éomer and his company, which I always found
He's a cool
to
character.
be an excellent scene. Not only is it just our trio of guys going out and finding the first humans they've found and who knows how long trailing these orcs, but they get treated with the same kind of respect as any traveling party might be, even though at first interaction they've got spears pointed at them, they're rounding them up in the circle.
Aggressive.
But at the same time, they realize, okay, these guys are just traveling along. No need to kill them like we just killed all 50 of those orcs in Uruk-hai. That's always a great scene for me, just seeing the power of Rohan. And it comes right after seeing the not-so power of Rohan with King Theoden.
It's a good introduction where the first thing you see is Aragorn walks over and looks across the lands and says
He calls out to him.
Yeah, well,
Riders of
I was
Rohan.
gonna say the horse lords, like that's your introduction. You know them as the horse lords. So what does that truly mean when you actually get introduced to a fighting force, and when they come around and quickly encircle, these great warriors? That's a really cool introduction. Then it really lends itself to the end of the movie
Right.
where you see the Rohirrim in their full might, and you just kind of see a small glimpse of it here.
Yeah. Oh man, what an
Little
incredible
sneak peek.
scene at the very end at Helm's Deep when Gandalf and the Rohirrim down that incredibly steep hill. That's got to be a double black diamond, I would guess.
That's a double black diamond for sure. Like
How was that
and
not an
fucking-
avalanche? You're good.
Kind of was.
You have hundreds of horses that are all running in lockstep. Like, is not one of the more
Kicking up
feeble
gravel.
horses not gonna kick one on
There are
accident?
no feeble horses.
In the
That's true.
Rohirrim? No.
Yeah, not
Not
led
a
by
chance.
Shadowfax. Yeah,
No,
my
the Lord
God.
of all horses.
the Lord of all horses.
But yeah, let's talk about the King of Rohan, Theoden, and
Grima, come to
Yeah.
me.
Tolkien spent literal years crafting different languages and different subsections of those languages, and yet he comes out with bangers like Mount Doom, Worm Tongue. He named Saruman and Sauron probably in the same afternoon, and I never got
the
that.
ring
but-
is just called the
He
ring.
was. It took a long time for him to actually write out the Elvish. So he was like, "All right, what? Oh, here we go."
Yeah.
It's kind of like our
it's
D&D characters. You know?
Yeah, we're just gonna
Name from
shortcut this.
Mountain of Doom. Mount Doom.
It's on the nose.
I've got it.
Something else that's a little on the nose. If we're talking about Rohan and the Rohirrim,
Oof.
I've got a gripe. Are we ready?
Oh,
I know.
a
We didn't, I
gripe.
don't even think we put a gripe.
Can we put
to
gripes
that.
in these films?
Sure,
mean,
we can.
sure,
Why not,
yeah.
right?
Okay,
let's hear it.
It's
Let's hear it.
incredibly
What do you got?
rare, and this is incredibly nitpicky. But when Eowyn walks out and sees the plains of Rohan as the
banner
band
falls.
of heroes are coming, the banner falls. It gets ripped off by the wind, and it falls as soon as the king's son dies. It falls right in front of Aragorn and company as they're trouncing their way on horseback into Edoras, and
Edoras, yeah.
I just think that is way too on the nose. There's so much good symbolism in this film and the trilogy, and just to have the banner fall right beside them.
Oh
I
my
always
god!
thought that was
I
really
love
cheap.
I love
You
that scene so
said
much.
Why it's
No.
not a gripe?
When
Your
Aragorn-
gripe. Symbolism.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
understand
cinematic,
it.
beautiful
it's
shot.
Way too on the nose for me.
Wow. I
Fast forward.
love that when it falls and then Aragorn looks over and you see Aragorn, he's stopped a little bit. The rest have gone forward and the banner falls and hits the grass. And he knows at that moment that evil is in these lands. Like I love it. It is definitely on the nose, but there's just something fantastical of like this kingdom has fallen, but the three riders are
that's
coming
it.
up to
The
save
kingdom
it.
has fallen.
And
I think,
I get
think
what you-
something
yeah.
can be good and on the nose at the same time. But
sure,
for me,
sure.
it's too on the
It's
nose,
too on the
and I
nose.
just. And thus ends my list of gripes.
Honestly,
I don't think I have
if
a
that's,
single
if
other
that's
one
your
for
gripe,
these.
that's pretty good.
I mean, that makes sense now. This makes sense now.
I will say, I think there are some scenes which I think should never have ever been cut in this film, and that's a gripe to me. But that's just the extended version. There are people making those theatrical
you
release
mean
decisions
all of
far above
them?
my pay. Well, sure, yeah, some of them can be cut. We'll talk more about
there were a
some later,
few
but
that I didn't actually I didn't like as much. That
One that
I'm
comes
happy
up.
that they
Wow.
were left out.
Okay, well, this is a safe space. If you have a gripe, you can talk about it, and we'll tell you why you're wrong.
Okay, and we already mentioned it, but I just don't think it fit. The ending was too long in the extended version. I know it's the long bottom leaf, and I love that.
Oh.
It's just it's what was wrong. I'm going back to it. It was what was wrong with the Hobbit movies. It's too much. The
Yeah.
humor is over the top. Also, really, that scene, if it was in the middle of the movie and there was a little bit more purpose to it, it drags. You know, I want the movie to go out on the most heroic moment possible, and that definitely needed to be cut. So I'm glad Peter Jackson didn't put in the theatrical.
No, bad gripe. I'll tell you why you're wrong. Yet again,
let's hear
everyone's wrong. No gripes allowed. That scene serves the very important purpose of showing how these two hobbits, Merry and Pippin, still maintain their positive outlook on the world. These hobbits are beautiful species of creatures who embody the goodness of the world. They embody positive outlooks in a world that's otherwise dark and terrible. And they go through this insane battle where trees are throwing rocks at orcs. They come out on top. They have partially defeated Sauron while he is still up in one of the two towers watching them. They're able to find joy in this little closet where they have a barrel of pipeweed and a full-ass roast turkey. And
I mean, I'm glad
water.
they got the roast turkey. I'm glad they got that roast turkey, and I'm
they were
glad to
ecstatic.
see that their height normalized. You know, it made
That's true.
Mary
Yeah.
feel a little
It's
bit
the same
better.
height.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the levity.
Jamie, that's also
so
beautifully
your gripe
put.
is wrong.
I've
Thanks,
never thought
Chris.
about it that way in such a poignant way because this is an easy contrast right over to the other Hobbit story where Sam has the best speech in all of the Lord of the
Oh
Rings.
my gosh.
perhaps.
It's so
good.
It's so good.
This is true in action form of hope worth fighting for. That there's some good in this world. They just went through their first ever war ever. They've never fought anything ever. And they've always been running up until this point where they finally took a stand at Isengard. And you're absolutely right. It's pretty poetic that they would just happen upon Longbottom Leaf after their trials. So I think you're right. I think that's actually a really important scene that should have stayed, contrary to what Andrew said, the one who introduced it. I
Thank
wish
you.
that had stayed now more than ever because
It's
of
called
how we put it.
pacing. All right, that's the reason why it should be cut. Anyways,
Sure, cut it in half.
I-
That scene is 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
I completely agree with the both of you. To your point, Andy, of bringing up the fact.
strong feelings either way.
No, I think it's totally 50-50 because if you bring up the point of the Hobbit movies, and it's quite honestly, yeah, we went on and on and on about the fact that there were just so many unnecessary parts that just like
there was yeah.
just it was too
Littered
much.
that-
It was
those
too
movies.
much,
Right.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and if it had just been a little bit more succinct, it would have been more effective. And I get that. The end of this extended version did drag on. However,
However, it was wonderful to watch it.
brings
I mean,
up a great
yeah.
point. And
It's
quite
fun.
honestly, I really enjoyed seeing two hobbits get high together with a giant tree.
That's fair.
And that was
That's
kind
fair.
of fun.
No.
was kind of
I'm
fun.
pretty sure that's a tobacco product.
Ooh,
Whatever.
We'll never know.
They're so
Um,
bothing.
You can't
Well,
spell
Jake, do you have
whimsical
any
without
gripes?
high. No. Because this movie doesn't deserve gripes.
Yes, you can.
Thank
It
you.
doesn't even have a G in it.
So,
Okay.
can I go back to something that's not a gripe for myself, Jamie? But
Please.
I would love
we
nothing
jumped over
more.
to gripes. I think we need to go
Yeah,
back
let's go
to
the
King
opposite
Theoden.
direction.
Let's go back to King Theoden. We didn't talk about Edoras, but we're pretty. We love these movies so much. We just jump around, and I hope the
much to
audience
talk
loves
about.
jumping with us. King Theoden, and yes, Grima is very, it's an odd character, but interesting how he's like skulking around and how he's slowly taken over the country. The moment that Saruman is pushed out of King Theoden, that is one of the coolest wizardry scenes up until this point. I think this is, obviously we just met Gandalf again, and just to
Gandalf
see
the White?
the White, to see, how he immediately shows power that then gives you a little bit more confidence in what's going to happen going forward. But to see the transformation, which I want to know Chris's opinion, if it really kind of lives up over 20 years or so, when Saruman's flown backwards and you see this decrepit, like skulking man, just like his beard start fading away into the brown that immediately starts to appear.
Then he says the line,
it
Andy.
looks
What does he
so
say?
good. What is the line?
Your
I know your face.
Magic.
I love that full scene. Like it's an interesting one, and also just the fact that you have Gandalf walking up with the different companions that they keep the guardsmen back that are also a little dingy. They're a little Bree like. They kind of remind me of some guys at Bree. They're not the standard the Rohirrim types
Right.
that are still around because Grima's the leader of this dying land. I just love that full introduction in Edoras.
I think it's not necessarily my favorite scene, but for some reason, it's the scene where I have the most lines memorized.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memeable moments, obviously the big meme, you have no power here. That was an actual...
Oh, here,
Thank you, Jake.
Gandalf, Storm Crow.
That was an actual meme back in the very early days
It
of the
was.
internet.
Yeah.
It feels
Some
like
of
it
my
was
favorites.
300 years ago. But my favorite line to say, just sometimes in real life, late is the hour in which
You do
this
say that a lot.
conjurer chooses to appear. I love that line.
You
from
say that
Grima
every time I
Wormtongue.
come over to your house.
A just question, my liege. And then you would not part an old man from his walking stick. Great little cleverness out of Gandalf. Just so many little power dynamic scenes in that one little entranceway. And we don't even know. This is a funny instance of there are evil forces at work. We know that there's two glowing towers in the distance, and we know that there's armies marching. But when we walk into Edoras and we see Grima Wormtongue without our heroes being there yet, we understand that something's wrong, but we have no idea what the evil is just yet. Gandalf walks in there and is just like, I got this. I release you. And he does.
Release
And-
you.
And so, Andy, that's such a cool scene. We don't really know. I'm a world builder type. Play a lot of games. I read a book every 10 years or so. I love the concept of magic systems, but in the same way, I also love how Tolkien's magic system is not really ever explained. You don't know what these wizards can really do. It's not like, hey, I cast fireball. It's more just kind of like they have control over this world in some way, shape, or form.
Well,
Which brings us to our D&D segment that we're running 16 minutes late on, Chris.
I almost forgot.
Wow.
Okay, well, so this is so for any of you Dungeons and Dragons fans out there, pop quiz: how long does one turn of combat take?
6 seconds.
Thank you, podcast host Jamie and DM extraordinaire. He should know that. This is when we are in the forest, and this is before Rohan, actually. This is when we're meeting Gandalf the White for the very first time, right? We know what happens to Legolas, Gimli, and all that, the whole thing, right?
drop their weapons.
I believe in my research, I have concocted the D&D 5th edition stat block for Gandalf.
Wow.
Just based on the abilities that he has
This
used,
is
and I'll bring it
interesting.
up now.
And we
Now-
will be publishing this on our Twitter, so go follow us.
I'm sure it's been done before, but yes, we will see this. I'll post my notes here. For any of you Dungeons and Dragons players out there, there's plenty of magic, sorcery, spells, but there's also sword, shield. There's also ranged weapons. We know this. Gandalf is super powerful. In a matter of about 6 seconds, he parries an axe thrown at him by Gimli.
Ooh,
He
okay.
uses deflect missiles to completely deflect an arrow shot by Legolas, one of the finest elf hunters, using one of the finest elf bows. And at the same time, he casts heat metal on Aragorn's sword to make him drop it. Thus,
Disarms him.
I had a feeling that Gandalf was a Dungeons & Dragons character. The only way that he could cast those spells and use these abilities is if he was a level 11 Way of the Cobalt monk, which is not actually officially in the Dungeons guide. That is a concocted Matt Mercer thing. That's a bit of a homebrew, but that's the level 11 Way of the Cobalt monk is going to allow him to spend 1 key point to take an extra reaction per turn, and that's the only way that he can do all these actions. Parrying an axe, that's one reaction using the Martial Adept feat, where he, at past level 4, can start taking feats. He's going to be able to do 2 reactions in this turn.
How long have you
That's-
thought about this for?
For far too long, and if you keep interrupting me, it's going to be even longer. So he parries the axe, right? Then he uses a second reaction. That's why he has to be a monk. He uses his second reaction to deflect missiles. That involves being a level 3 monk. No problems there. Finally, he casts heat metal, not available to a spellcasting monk unless he dips in to the druid tree. He has to get to level 3 of a druid in order to get second level transmutation spells. So I think that Gandalf is a level 11 Wave the Cobalt Monk, level 3 Druid, level 6 Wizard caster, and I think he's pretty powerful.
I think he might. That's
think he's
incredible
pretty
work there,
powerful.
Chris. That is
Thank you.
spectacularly done, well researched. I assume all of the facts you've been bringing out are accurate. They sound correct, at least. And we should be doing this for more characters. For every movie we watch, we gotta start giving D&D levels to them.
I'm speechless.
It seems like he's just, and he is. He's this all powerful character, reincarnated from the dead. Gandalf the White. What a cool scene to happen.
Yeah.
in,
Yeah,
right?
I love
They
that
think
scene.
they're about to
That's-
fight Saruman.
Do you think that's what Tolkien envisioned when he drew this up? He like went through the D&D guidebook and was like, "How the fuck?
Yeah.
How complicated can I make this guy?"
That's
I
exactly
know
what
this
he did.
guy.
I'm
Christopher
sure
Pyle
that's how that worked in
80
sequence.
years is gonna crack the code. I don't know how he's gonna do it. He's gonna watch the scene, and someone's gonna figure it out.
That's in the appendix right there. He has a copy of the 0th edition D&D, and he said, "This is how you create the most powerful wizard in all of Middle Earth."
Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro stole the idea from
That's
Tolkien.
exactly right.
Ain't that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And he still has 30 feet of movement left.
that's,
What's he doing?
Well, probably more if he's a level 11
I've
monk. He
never
could probably
seen him
move
move that
40,
quickly.
45 feet.
Oh my god,
This is true.
He doesn't
And he's
even
a
need it.
mountain
He just
that's actually
he
the
just
only
calls
reason.
shadow
That's the
facts.
only thing that goes against it, Chris. Is the
Yeah.
fact that he 30 feet of movement.
And you
All
need
right,
to
back
add
to
the
Lord of the Rings here.
mounted combatant feat, Chris. So just tack that on there somewhere. But we were talking, Andy, you were going to say something about the magic system of Lord of the Rings, how we don't really get any specifics as to how exactly the magic works, which allows us to just kind of experience it in a storytelling way.
You experience everything together. That's what I think this movie, the Fellowship of the Ring and the books themselves, you experience things through the journey. It's not hitting you over the head with fantasy tropes or what just you meet an Ent. You see how the Ent talks, and then you meet more Ents, right? It's like things just grow over time, and that's what's so like it's not realistic because it's a
Ents
fantasy
grow
world,
over
but
time.
it feels realistic in a lot of ways. And they build up to what I think, and I'm zooming here forward. They build up to what I think is one of the most climactic sequences in Helm's Deep, definitely in fantasy. I don't know if it's. I would say at the top
film
5.
history.
I would say. I mean, that's a tough thing to say, but like
I don't think you'd be wrong.
From a fantasy perspective, the build up in the last hour of this film to get to the Battle of Helm's Deep is just incredible. It's shocking. It just crescendos. We've been saying that word a lot. It crescendos. The music does, the preparation, the gloom, the how dark it is. It's
watching
beautiful.
I crescendo.
Peak crescendo.
Ew.
Yeah, the sheer enormity of
Wow.
that scene is really just truly mesmerizing. The fact that they have so many stunt actors involved in this massive movie set, and one of my favorite scenes is when we have the one orc running up and Legolas is trying to shoot him as he's
Kill him! Take him
and he's got the
down!
Olympic torch going to light Helm's Deep up and just dives in for the dead.
That's a great dive. Honestly, just incredible.
great dive.
Incredible by that orc.
Like gold medal dive. But quite honestly, it's from the moment that scene starts, it is so intriguing. It's so entertaining, and I think it's honestly like a 20-minute scene, and it goes by like that. I mean, they did such a good job with the choreography. Everything was great.
Even the cuts back and forth between that scene and then the March of the Ents and then the Osgiliath, like they just work so well together, but you
flawless.
really
It's
want to
flawless.
keep going. Like I really like going to Isengard and seeing that because of the nature aspect, but there's just something about being there as Aragorn's tossing Gimli, or when the actual explosion of Helm's Deep takes place. Something I hadn't noticed, one of the Uruk-hai in that scene gets thrown up 20 stories in the air and then comes crashing down into the army. It's incredible. I've never noticed it before, but like there's just so much happening and it's masterful.
Yeah, it's outstanding.
Great
scene.
Hollywood set pieces. Yep, set building
100%.
and just directing.
And the greatest character arc of all time, as Andy mentioned, Gimli being thrown by Aragorn across the gap that he can't make.
Don't tell the elf.
yeah,
Incredible
Great
murders
characters.
too by
great
Gimli.
characters.
43 kills in that one battle. Pretty dang good.
By the
He
way,
got
when
to a
they
slow
when they're
start,
on
only
that
2
bridge
kills.
and they're taking after he gets tossed, there is just the most heroic moments of all time in this. And you're right, Jake. It's just one after the other.
Yeah,
It goes so quick.
It's
yeah,
incredible.
marvelous,
But what
marvelous storytelling.
my question
have to-
is what was Legolas doing for 80% of that battle? Where at the very beginning of the fight, we get who's typing?
Oh, can you hear that?
Oh, Andy.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
What was Legolas doing during
I was looking up-
of that battle?
I think he's shooting arrows.
I mean,
Google
he's
real
definitely
quick
shooting
how
arrows.
to
Jamie brings up a
ignore
good
Jamie
point
most
because
effectively.
because Legolas is at 17 kills and Gimli's at 3, and then the numbers completely swap. How does Gimli
Legolas
catch
does
up so
nothing.
fast?
Okay,
Well,
well,
clearly,
Gimli catches
gets
up
thrown
because
to the
he's-
side where all the orcs are. All the
No,
orcs.
that-
Legolas is
that's
too
actually
busy
a good point,
surfing
though.
down the stairs. He can't be killing when he's doing all
that's
sorts
true.
of cool tricks.
That was
and
only like
stuff.
4 kills.
Also, he looks pretty hot while doing
He's
it.
just getting
so, I mean,
breaker points.
That's true.
That's
That's
really
what
what's
he's
happening.
doing.
Yeah.
Game breaker.
yeah.
Time is it?
It's game time.
And Jamie,
Actually, this. I'm gonna interrupt. Sorry, Andy. This
go
scene just reminds me of. This scene reminds me of one of my favorite games growing up. PlayStation 2, Return of the King. We're at Helm's Deep. You're roundhouse kicking the ladders with circle, and you're just wrecking havoc. Yeah, I mean, I was having so much fun. The replayability, it's just the Lord of the Rings like universe as a whole is just so marvelously fun.
Sure.
Great game. Iconic game.
Great game, great game. I might go buy it and play it again.
You should.
Yeah.
And Jamie, what I was just looking up here is I think we need to do a quick eulogy for Haldir. I was looking up Haldir's name. What a awesome moment too. His
What a hero.
death, heroic. Another heroic
Yeah.
moment in this like massive
We've
scale
come to
battle.
honor that allegiance.
Yeah, coming to aid the men, even though Theoden King just says that no one's here to help us. No one would ever help. And then boom, who shows up other than these elves,
Now-
these heroes?
Here's something. Because all these elves show up to save the day, right? And it's very heroic. It's honoring the old alliances. It's and they probably don't win without them, which is great. Imagine being one of the elves that has to go and fight at Helm's Deep when all of the other elves are just casually strolling to the Grey Havens to take a ship off to eternal bliss and sunshine under the light of the Valinor. And what was it? I mean, was it a volunteer thing? Was it a conscription thing? I mean, eternal happiness and peace. You go fight at Helm's
You're
Deep.
the best
damn it.
archer left in all the land. You go there. Yeah.
Yeah, I just.
I
How
have
did
a-
they decide that?
I have a lore question because I need some answers here. So Haldir says, Rivendell, greetings from Rivendell, where Elrond wants to honor the allegiance, whatever.
Right.
But we met Haldir in Lorien with Galadriel. So are these Galadriel's men, or are they Rivendell elves? I actually want to know that. I don't know. That always confused me.
Yeah, I
Well, how much
don't
domain
remember.
does Lord
Good
Elrond
question.
have? Like, I thought he was just kind of the
He's just of that city, right?
like of that's like I don't know. We might need to research into that. We'll get back to you,
Okay.
audience.
Hoopla.
But it just goes to say that it is just kind of a confusing scene. Like, oh, Lord Elrond sent these troops. That's great. Lord Elrond has absolutely no faith at this point in the film, the trilogy, has no faith that they could win at Helm's Deep, and so he just sends his men.
Yeah. Take my
called
last
honor,
good 200
Chris.
men.
You guys
Yeah,
go fight
but-
it out. I'm gonna get on this boat. Peace.
No. He does not get on the boat.
He doesn't.
He sends Arwen on the boat, though, which was quite the emotional scenes. We had a few of those scenes, both dream sequences of Arwen with Aragorn,
Love
and
interest,
her
yes.
conversation with her father Elrond about whether or not she's going to be with Aragorn for a fleeting moment and then live the rest of her eternal life after his death, or if she goes off to Valinor to live in eternal happiness.
Not just only living eternally, just lamenting in that entire eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
life
Hugo
of
Weaving.
surefire depression.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Hugo
can work
Weaving
Valinor, dude.
paints.
There is a lot to be happy about in
isn't
Valinor.
it just heaven?
So
No,
Yeah.
I think Jake's talking about the grim picture that he paints for Arwen.
Right, exactly.
Oh, sure.
staying on Earth.
And
Where she
Hugo
withers
Weaving-
away.
I mean, he
Hugo
really
Weaving-
draws this thing
yeah.
out. This is like a Bob Ross, like he's really painting that photo, and she's
100%.
all for there. I mean, the Dunedain. I mean,
Well, no, she cracks. I mean, she gives in. That scene is so emotionally tearing because not only does she just want Middle Earth to succeed in the light, but also, of course, she's in love with Aragorn, and that makes perfect sense. She wants both things to be true. Hugo Weaving, Liv Tyler, great chemistry in this one little tiny scene that they have in this entire film. It's easy to forget about them even having a scene, but it's very important. The elves are going west. She doesn't want to, but he says, you will watch him die. You will live in doubt and shadow for the rest of your almost nearly infinite life, and you will never be happy. You will never find the answers you seek. And when that still doesn't even really break her, he finally looks at her in the face and says, do I not also have your love?
Yeah.
And that's what breaks her. Liv Tyler, a wonderful actress, just starts crying and says, you have my love. And then that's the moment she decides, I'm going.
remind me, why can't she go to Valinor after Aragorn would technically die?
Because
the last
reasons,
boat, baby.
Jake. Because
Oh,
reasons.
the last boat. I see.
It's the last,
The
train
last
home.
melon. Got it.
It's called drama. It's called stakes. You're always asking for stakes.
Like it's such. I mean, I understand stakes, but if she's just sad, she can just go to the Vale, and then she's not sad, and then it kind of solves everything.
Shut up, Jake.
I have a gripe. I have a gripe.
No.
Jake, you can't just fly the eagles into Mordor, okay? You can't just do that, okay?
True. No trump cards here.
Jamie, take
Does
us
anybody
somewhere.
have any other favorite parts of this movie that we have not discussed so far?
I have a favorite part.
Yeah. This is the extended edition podcast.
Chris,
we
can
can't stop
I
just
talk
yet.
about
Andrew,
one of them?
Have the floor.
Okay.
I'm just saying, in a general sense, there's no way we can stop just yet.
The fact that you take the introduction of Denethor out of the theatrical is, I think, a huge issue for Faramir's character. This is it's a wonderful scene to get introduced to Faramir and really understand him at a deep and sad level. But then at the same time, you get the reintroduction of our favorite character of Boromir and how he of all things, you know that he loves Gondor, but he really loves his brother. And I think this scene really propels Faramir's character, but also the introduction of Denethor in Return of the King. Like,
Yeah.
it's just that brief moment of a father that has his first child that he loves, and he doesn't this other. And there's just something sad, and like there's a lot behind that, and you don't know like what's the driving force necessarily, but I think it provides some good backstory for Faramir as he makes his decisions throughout the rest of the movie. I just think that's a wonderful scene, and then having Sean Bean back was awesome.
Yeah, I agree. That is a really important scene, and quite honestly, just kind of gives you insight as how much of an asshole this guy is. Truly, like you really feel. Yeah, exactly. You really feel bad for Faramir throughout the whole sequence in terms of like the sheer amount of disappointment that he's brought to his father, and it's like, is that justified? Probably not, but dude's but dude's so like invested.
But it gives you
in
context.
His firstborn son. It does. Context, very important context. So I agree. Let's keep that one, Andy. We don't need to cut that one.
Also, with Osgiliath, you see that Faramir had lost Osgiliath, and then Boromir got it back, and the trumpets were blaring. But then later in the movie, everything happens in Osgiliath, so it provides you context of what is happening in that land, right? So I think that was a missed opportunity.
That's why we should always watch the extended versions, because it's got everything you need. And if it's missing anything, like Tom Bombadil, read in the book.
I agree, Andy. This is the one that should have stayed. This is the longest cut scene from the theatrical version, by the way, coming in at almost 5 minutes. And it's a flashback, which, sometimes storytelling devices don't work that way. I don't think there's many other flashbacks even in this trilogy. I couldn't agree more. You hit all my points, and I don't even have much more to say because you hit those points. It introduces the Faramir relationship. We introduce Osgiliath, which for some reason in the theatrical version is a very key point. But all we know in the theatrical version is just that it's
just like a place.
Military
we don't know.
outpost, if anything. It's just a forward place where
you don't know until Return of the King, right?
Exactly. We have no idea. So it makes no sense in the theatrical version why there's even combat at Osgiliath in the first place. And yes, we see Denethor and we see the Faramir relationship. We also hear the line, a chance for Faramir, Captain of Gondor, to show his quality, which makes so much sense later when we hear it and Sam say it in Osgiliath. And so of all the scenes, I think that one should have been kept most of all. I had no reason. In my notes here, I have the Osgiliath Faramir scene should never have been cut, period. Travesty, period. And I think that's all I need to say.
That's it. You nailed it. Yeah. It completely changes Faramir as a character, and he's wonderful in the extended version. As this is the extended version of the Hoopla podcast, Chris, you have more topics of discussion that you want to bring up?
That was the big one. I mean, we hadn't talked much about Faramir. We talked about the encampment scene with Smeagol and Gollum, which was great. I mean, what else did we miss? I mean, we talked a little Dungeons and Dragons. We talked a lot. We did kind of gloss over the enemy, Saruman, just out of nowhere building an army of legions. I do like that extended scene where Grimma's like, "But sir, there is no legion enough. You would need thousands of men," and Saruman, "Tens of thousands." Wonderful, wonderful scene. And then that one's not cut, actually. That one's in there in the theatrical. One that is cut is when Wormtongue's talking to Saruman about the ring that he sees on Aragorn's finger. That one also probably should have stayed in there. We get more scenes talking about the heir of Numenor, the last remaining ranger of the bloodline.
Sets up the third one.
It does set up the Return of the King. They talk so much more about the bloodline and the rangers and everything that about Aragorn's heritage in the first film than they do the second. And I don't get how you can then go to Return of the King without at least mentioning it a couple more times in Two Towers. So that leaves a little bit of mystery. You only get that in the extended edition. Maybe we're just saying, as longtime extended and Lord of the Rings fans of the extended editions, we should be watching the extended editions. But I think just some of that is lost.
You can watch either, and they're all wonderful.
Oh,
just
yeah, you can still.
It's as good as it gets. Because
wait, I have something to bring up, and it's gonna be brief. They introduced elephants to us. What else do you need? Okay,
Great. Yeah,
I love a good
true.
elephant.
Yeah,
And the
agreed.
potatoes meme.
Yes,
Potatoes.
Boil them, mash them, put them in a stew.
Did anyone learn anything in this rewatch here for the pod?
Oof.
Did I learn anything?
That's a
What a great question.
Yeah.
About the movie, about the context, sure. Maybe about yourselves. I don't know.
I learned that I learned nothing about myself, and I never will. But I learned something about J.R.R. Tolkien. Is that he denied any allegory to World War II in The Lord of the Rings. While there's clearly inspiration taken from the Great War, which he fought in, and World War II in the Lord of the Rings story. But Tolkien actually has opposed the thoughts that there's a direct allegory in the Lord of the Rings to war, although you still see his general views on war and his experience of living in England during, or Britain, whatever. What's the difference? Who cares? Living wherever he lived during, between, and after
They're different.
these
by the
world
way.
wars.
Don't say that online. They are different. Okay.
Very much
all
not
of
the
our
UK.
He was in
fans
England.
out
He was
there.
in England. Everyone. Okay.
He was in Ireland, probably. Who knows? Whatever. It's all the same thing.
You think it was Northern Ireland?
Oh man.
But yeah, you can see the inspiration
Yeah.
from the suffering that happened in Europe during those wars, and the views that people had of how war is this like foolish thing that it's just sending people to die.
The
And
war machine, yeah.
What is the point of fighting? I mean, there is a point of fighting for keeping your family safe and keeping your home safe, but the general idea of why are we fighting this war? You can see that clearly. So I learned that, Chris. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely does, and I learned something from you just now. Thanks. I'd always thought that many of his stories and many of the industrious versus nature concepts that we get from Isengard tearing down the forest was always strewn on by the resource collection of the war effort, and I did not know that he denied that, and that's an interesting take on it.
Yeah. What did you learn, Christopher?
A couple of quick things. I again am big dumb and did not realize that Brago the horse.
Oh, I love
the
Brago.
one that they free, the one that Aragorn frees and says, "This
You thought
this
it
horse
was
has seen
Bill.
too much
You
war."
thought it was Bill.
No,
Okay.
no.
I miss Bill.
No,
I thought it was Bill
no,
the first time I ever watched the movie.
no. In the extended version, there is a scene where Aragorn talks down Brago the horse. This is the horse that belonged to the son of King Theoden. He calms Brago down by speaking ancient Elvish. These are words that apparently help soothe animals. And Eowyn sees that, falls in love with him. Who doesn't fall in love with Viggo Mortensen? But that horse's name is Brago. It's also the horse that comes and saves him on the riverside later in the film.
Bill.
I did not know that was the same horse. I'd never known that.
Yeah.
So there's your fun fact in case you need
I
it.
did actually think it was Bill for probably the first half of the times I watched that, because
Sure.
I didn't know what other horse he Bill's the one that he lets go in the Fellowship of the Ring. Maybe he he just followed them to Rohan. I kind of liked that story. My own headcanon there.
And I also have one more, if I can go again. Does
Please
anyone
do.
else have one?
Please.
Let's talk diversity, of which there's not too much in this trilogy. However, the Two Towers, to my research, is the only one of the three that passes the Bechdel test. For the uninitiated, if you are not familiar with the Bechdel test, this is a test of a film or piece of media if two women are ever having a conversation to each other about something other than a man. And by the skin of its teeth, the Two Towers does pass the Bechdel test because the little girl asks Eowyn where her mother is in Rohan.
Oh my
Not
god.
And that's
to
it.
nitpick your
That's
Bechdel test, but does the
And that's
little
it.
girl have a name? Because the characters have,
They
to, be named characters.
Yes. Her name is Freya or Freda or something.
Okay.
Yes, her name's Freda.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they have to
There
be
we
named.
go.
You're right.
That's a good call
Excellent
out.
catch.
Okay.
So it does pass the Bechdel test.
Yippee!
Yeah, but what other test does it pass?
The awesome
being
test.
badass
The
test,
great movie test.
fantastic trilogy test. I mean, it just keep going. I mean, it doesn't get better.
Okay, there is one.
Every single test. The GRE, the MCAT, the LSAT.
Oh, wow.
It's got it all.
Wow.
Hey, before we move on to our final, numbers here, I did have a question. What you guys think about first of all, they tease this in the Fellowship, the path that Frodo's going to have to take.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think about these three scenes? Maybe in a rapid fire. First of all, them circling around and getting lost in the labyrinth of the caves. I think that's a really interesting, we didn't really talk about that. The second is the Dead Marshes, which is
Ooh,
a
we did not talk about the
terrifying,
Dead Marshes.
really opening
That's true.
there. When Frodo falls into the water, the eyes open, the spirits of these dead are almost lighting fires. Then you have the Nazgul over top, right? And then the third one there is the Black Gate, where Sam falls down. And that was actually that's another comical, maybe gripe. I don't know if it's a gripe, but the fact that the Frodo's, cape, they're right under, they look under the cape, and there's the feet of the two.
You're gonna
Now,
say
hold on.
I don't know.
You're griping with the magical elven cloak.
True. Yeah.
Okay, that's true. No, that's true. But there's
true.
just it is an elvish cloak. But the fact
You've
that
disappointed
it
Jimbo.
looks exactly like a rock, I don't know. Even on camera, it didn't.
Ancient
So-
magic.
I was chastised at the top of the pod for saying that the Sam and Frodo stories are easily the weakest point, and you just picked 3 scenes from that entire campaign to criticize.
No, okay. I didn't criticize any of the scenes other than maybe the rock. I enjoy those scenes. I was wanting to know, what do you guys think about those scenes? We didn't talk about them in rapid
They're
fire.
dull and too long.
Chris doesn't get to talk.
Okay, that's something.
One thing I'll talk about the marshes. One thing that I do think is
Okay.
very
Go for it.
interesting that they did in that film or in that scene was making the decision. And I don't know if this is written in the original text, but the decision to have Gollum save Frodo. Is that intentional to save the ring, or is that intentional to save Frodo? Because regardless, I think Frodo interprets it as Gollum trying to save Frodo.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the intent. I think it was to save my precious. But
Yeah.
the difference between the two in terms of intention is actually extremely significant.
It's a good thought.
Yeah, I think that's a very good thought. And it goes along with what Andy was saying earlier about how Frodo has taken on, in Smeagol's mind, Frodo is now replacing what the precious was. And there's always that question of exactly what you're asking. Is Smeagol actually devoted to Frodo, or is he still devoted to the person who's carrying the precious? And we'll never know. Well, we'll probably find out next week. But yeah, it's a very interesting question. Is Smeagol just playing the long game because he's only in it for the ring, or is there ever a chance that
he's
he
been
could
in
be
it for
redeemed?
400 years? Dude's playing a
That's true.
long game.
All right, Chris, what do you think about
does
the
it
Black
matter?
I think that's a silly scene. I think they should have been seen, to use a little bit of a homonym there. I think you're right. It's kind of
Homophone.
lame. Homophone.
Wow, Chris is dumb.
What an intellectual, this guy. As you can see, there are books on Jamie's bookshelf, and there are none on mine.
And my axe.
And my axe.
Well, I think we've had a wonderful discussion here today about this fantastic movie. So, tune in next week as we discuss The Return of the King to round out our Lord of the Rings trilogy here on the Hoopla podcast. But as we end every episode of this podcast, we do, of course, have to go around and give our classic Hoopla ratings on this movie on a scale of 1 to 11 for Hobbit Hoopla. Let's start with Andy this week. What'd you think about The Two Towers?
I mean, The Two Towers is my... So, should I give you... No, I can't give you that rating.
Yes, you can.
Okay, I like The Two Towers a bit more than The Fellowship of the Ring. I like I said last week, Fellowship opens up this world masterfully and just gets us ready for some of the most climactic battles. That third act is just shocking. You can rewatch that third act over and over and over again.
I do.
You do. I think we all do.
It's my alarm in the morning.
And even
It takes him an hour to get out of bed every single day.
Even to Chris's point, the Frodo and Sam scenes may be a little bit slower, but the ending there with Sam's kind of outlook on Middle Earth, that's one of the best fantasy quotes of all time. And then you have the battles that are masterful and to this day haven't been matched, in my opinion.
I agree.
So I am going to give this a... Ooh. All right, let's hear it, Jake.
I would say they haven't been trumped. I could say they've been matched. Game of Thrones has done a fantastic job.
Sure.
The Battle of Winterfell probably trumped it, but we couldn't see it, so who knows?
And you know what? You know what I could see really well is that old man with his bow just let it go a little too early. I'm going to give it a 109 out of 11 Hooplas.
Nice. Hoopla. That is quite the rating right there. Not a lot of room for improvement. If The Return of the King
Unless there was
is
one
your number
other.
one, we'll find out. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Jakey boy, let's hear your rating.
Yeah, my ratings aren't going to be accurate because I didn't go back and rewatch Fellowship. So as we're doing this rewatch, I'm now providing my rating. I have to provide that disclaimer because otherwise, it is what it is. I want because I like Fellowship. I would say if I had to hierarchy it, it'd be Return of the King, Fellowship, Two Towers. However, I've already put this Fellowship rating at 104, so I'm not going to go above that. It's a 104 for me. Two Towers was great. I enjoyed every second of it. Battle of the Bastards isn't better than anything we've seen here, but it was surely entertaining. I loved all the different shots, all the different, journeys we see between all our different characters. One of the things that's great about Two Towers is we really begin to see the progression of people developing the development of their different personas. We see, a more laid back, relaxed sort of Gandalf the White. Now we see this courageous, bold, fully empowered, Gandalf the White, and now you see Frodo begin to succumb to the ring, and then you see Sam become brave, and you see Gollum becoming insane, and it's just I love it. I love it. It's the second coming. Oh man, great personas, great characters, great people, great times. 104.
Incredible.
Wow.
Chris, we now have 109 at the top. We got 104 from Jake.
Chris, what did you
Where are
give
you
Fellowship?
putting this movie at?
Can you remind us?
I gave Fellowship an exact 100 because as fantastic as a film as it is and a great introduction to this world, I still believe it is the weakest of the three. And that's saying almost nothing considering I give it a 100 out of a 111. This film
Out of
only
a what?
takes the...
Sorry.
And an 11-1, my apologies. This film only takes the concept and the very interesting characters of the first film and just expounds upon them, as Jake was saying. Just gives everyone new drive, new missions, new personalities, and it really starts to show us what they're going to fight for, if fight at all. We see so much in this movie. It just amplifies. It takes everything from the first and just pumps it up to 11. If only there were a third film in the trilogy that could maybe even turn it up to 12.
Ooh.
Maybe there is one. We'll find out.
Is
Stay
there?
tuned. But I'm going to give this film a 104 with Jake because
Hoopla.
I do believe it is better than the first, but just barely. And that just comes from, like I said, taking everything and just turning it up a notch.
Incredible. Yeah, this is my favorite movie, maybe of the trilogy. I don't know. I changed my mind. Whichever one I've watched most recently, either Two Towers or
That's
Return of
fair.
the King, is always my favorite. So currently, in this moment right now, Two Towers
only
is
there
my
was,
favorite
like,
Lord of the Rings movie.
A psychological concept that described the bias of watching something recently.
Recent, yeah.
We'll
I
never
don't
know.
think there is.
But-
Yeah, I don't think there is.
I'm going to go ahead. I think I'm going to join Andy with this 109 out of the 111 Hooplas. The Two Towers is just beautiful. Every character has a great storyline that they go through. The relationships grow in beautiful ways with Sam and Frodo and Smeagol joining the party, with Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn on their adventures as they see how the evil is taking over different parts of the world and how they have to stand up and join the people, the men of the various regions to help save the day. And the battle scenes are unmatched, unrivaled.
It's
the
Treebeard.
greatest. And Treebeard is also there. I love Treebeard.
You made me think of something. I kind of enjoy how the trio between Gandalf, Legolas, and Aragorn sees the evil sort of explode globally, whereas the
This is
trio...
dwarf erasure.
Huh?
It's
I
dwarf
said
erasure.
Gandalf instead of
You're
Gimli.
leaving Gimli out of this?
Oh yeah, Gimli. Did I not say Gimli? Oh shit, yeah, I meant Gimli. Holy shit, my bad. Yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
I was
Actually, it
confused.
does.
I was like, oh wait, Gandalf, Legolas, and Aragorn. When were they only those three there together?
Anyhow. Comparatively, we have Gollum, Sam, and Frodo. Made sure I said all the names I wanted to correctly that time. See all of the evil explode intrinsically during this journey, and I think that's, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting when you started raising the point there,
Whoa.
Jimbo.
Oh my god,
That is
yeah,
very.
Jake,
That is beautiful.
Oh wow.
Unfortunately, intrinsic and internal conflict is way too boring for Chris, so he just had to fast forward through that whole part of the movie.
Oh, no.
But
You know
Chris, I
what?
do have
Yes, it was far too boring for me. Give me Helm's Deep twice. I would rather just watch it back to back.
good news for
And
you,
you will,
Christopher.
and you will.
When I wake
Set
up
it as your
tomorrow.
alarm, Chris.
He's watching Helm's Deep.
And with that,
But Chris, I have good news for you before we leave the podcast. If you ever decide to read a book, you can read The Lord of the Rings, and when you get to the Two Towers, the Sam and Frodo is one section, and then the Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, and everything else is a different section. So you can just fully skip the whole
Just
Sam and
not
Frodo story
read.
if you
Fantastic.
hate yourself. Yeah.
I
or
know
you
what
could
happens.
audiobook it.
Okay, Chris, question.
Could do that.
If you had that in movie format where it was just a singular section, would you have skipped it? Just back to
No.
back to back to back.
No, and I said that during my piece. I mean, it's not skippable. No part of this movie is skippable. I'm just saying the Sam and Frodo scenes are intentionally dull, as to show that
They're
well,
not
you said it
dull.
best. They are dull, but it is. It's
Dull
intrinsic.
visually, you mean? You mean visually?
They're
The camera.
I mean,
dulls.
visually,
They're
an
dark?
attitude.
They're dark. They're dim.
All they do is get
They're-
captured and beat and questioned, and it comes alive again in the third one. Don't get me wrong. It's just this middle part of their journey is by far the least interesting. And
You are a
And
fool.
with that,
You think plot is more important than character? You disgust me. I still love you, but you disgust me. Which means we have to end this episode of the Hoopla podcast.
Jamie Wise the
I
Brave
know.
is getting off. He's up at the log.
As we end every episode of the Hoopla podcast, it is time for the moment of highest hoopla, the quote of the movie. What do you got for us this week, Andy?
As Gimli said, he was twitching because he's got my axe embedded in his nervous system. What do you think about that?
I would
so
like to bring up a gripe.
Is
with
that
your
the?
quote.
I did say my other quotes were. I did say there's a few other quotes that are maybe the most, the best fantasy quotes of all time. And I just had to pick this one because it just felt right after watching Gimli
The line.
won that battle. Okay.
43.
43.
But if Legolas had killed 75, would Gimli have said 76? We'll never know.
Probably.
Can Gimli count? I think that's an important question we should
Are,
ask.
this is a question at the tail end here for Jake and JB. Are we going to approve coming up with a quote from the extended edition? Are we gonna
Yeah.
let that slide?
Wow.
We did watch the extended edition. I think that
Absolutely.
counts.
I approve.
Okay, all right.
I approve. Yeah,
Just
yeah,
making sure.
for sure.
Would you rather have this quote, or Boromir show up in the theatrical version? Actually,
My quote is Hobbits sounds like orc mischief to me.
My quote is meat's back on the menu, boys.
oh, we didn't even talk about that
That's a
one.
great line.
And with
That's a
that,
great
it is
line.
time to end this episode of the Hoopla podcast. Thank you all for listening or watching. If you're watching us now that we're a video, tune in next week. Like, subscribe, follow Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. Love you. Bye.